Hi, I'm Deborah Rosati, founder and CEO of Women Get On Board, and this is Women Get On Board in Conversation. Our goal with these video series is to offer women business leaders advice for their board journeys through thought-provoking conversations with experts in the boardroom. It's our pleasure to offer insights that will empower you with confidence and courage to lead and serve on corporate boards. Today, I am pleased to be speaking to Cybele Negris, President, CEO, and co-founder of Webnames, and a very accomplished board member, to discuss her board journey to her first public company board. Cybele, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Deborah.
Thank you. So we're going to start off with just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started on your board journey.
Sure, I'm happy to. So, as you said, my name is Cybele Negris, and I'm co-founder and CEO and director of Webnames.ca. We are Canada's original .ca registrar. So my business partner, John Demko, actually founded the .ca domain name in 1987. And I met him a number of years later, around 1999, when he was essentially overwhelmed by the number of domains that he had under management. And I was doing some contract work at the University of British Columbia in the industry liaison office. And I met him there and was fascinated by the story and the volunteer work that he was doing for the last 13 years. So I ended up working with him and our tech transfer manager at the university to package up the technology and eventually sold it to the Canadian Internet Registration Authority. So that was many years ago. That was in 2000 when that happened. And Webnames.ca was born, and we became one of the accredited registrars under CIRA. And so I was a board member from the day one, and it was a few of us, business partners, as well as UBC. And we eventually, as the company grew, started to bring on external board members to whom we paid and brought on another level of accountability for the organization. So I kind of learned my board governance and some of those skills from that first experience. But then I took it to external organizations. And I think because I'm a woman in technology, a lot of these opportunities started coming as organizations realized that technology was a really important part of the growth in companies in the 2000s. So I started being asked on not-for-profit boards like Wired Women, Small Business BC, Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, and then eventually started to serve on boards for government. I was on the Small Business Roundtable as vice chair to our Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation. I served on the Premier's Technology Council, and then eventually to some university boards as well, and then on to more for-profit boards after that. So that was kind of my journey in terms of my experience, and coupled with that, a lot of education along the way.
So where our intersection, I'm smiling because as you said, as Sarah became more formal and grew up a little bit and wanted outside board members, that's where I came in 2005. And I think that's where we intersected. And it's funny that you say it because I was a woman in tech and I was getting a lot of opportunities in the early 2000s. Oh, we need a woman on a board, or you've got technology and it's evolved. So really nice to see your journey and nice to have an intersection with our experience at CIRA. So thank you for sharing that. So when you come to board, how do you show up as a board member and take on leadership roles? Because I think that's really important, how you show up and how you evolve, because you certainly have had a very accomplished board journey, but it's a lot of the work that you do showing up. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, absolutely. So I would say that I take every opportunity for education. So some of these boards will provide education. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But in terms of showing up, When I first joined a board, I'm very conscious of the learning curve for, especially as you move up in your board career. Organizations get more complex. They're larger organizations. Many of them are highly regulated, and especially when you get to a public board level. So I'm very careful when I join a board. I read all the materials, and as much materials as some boards have. I would say like several hundred pages to sometimes over 1,000 pages of board materials with the committee stuff. So I read all of it. I make notes in advance to include any questions that I want in terms of clarification on items that I might not necessarily understand where the materials are going, or something that I want to bring up for further discussion as a board together. The other thing that I do is when I first join a board, I attend every committee meeting. So even if I'm not appointed to those committees, I ask the committee chairs for permission to sit in and observe on those committees. And by doing that, I find I've basically accelerated my learning by at least a year when I first joined a board. Because what it does is it helps you really understand all of those discussions that happen prior to those decisions being brought to the board for in those resolutions to be approved. But you hear all of the nuances of like what took place, the conversations that took place to lead to those decisions. So I find that really helpful. And then typically I would say that when I join a board, usually within a year or two, I am appointed to a committee chair role. So then taking those leadership roles is yet another level. It's like at least twice as much work. You need to be very well prepared. I ensure that I have like my speaking notes and everything well prepared in advance. I make sure to listen first when I have committee members that some might be more apt to jump in and others are very quiet, and you always want to make sure that you're including everybody in the conversations, that we are asking the tough questions and then driving that consensus in the conversation.
So those are really good tips about chairing committees, chairing a board. And there's the term they say, wait. And that really replies like, why am I talking? Whether you're a committee member or a chair of a board. And I think, having that courage and confidence, but listening, I think is a really important skill. And the preparation of going into meetings. And I always encourage anyone, especially if I'm chairing an audit committee, to say, you know what, I think you should be attending as an observer, even if you're not on that particular committee, because like you say, you get that insights of the deliberations and the thought process that takes place before it comes to the board for approval. So anyway, kudos on that. So maybe with that background, and this is when you and I really had the conversation, we've been having conversation over the years. So how did you land your first public company board? Because that was last year, right? So maybe how it came to you, what it is, are there differences being on public versus your for-profit or not-for-profit?
Yeah, definitely. So this was a long time coming, like 20 years of serving on boards, right? Before I landed my first public board. And I think, in terms of the learnings, I've been gearing up to get to this point. So in terms of process, a recruiter came to me and actually approached me and told me that they felt I had the right qualifications. So they were looking for somebody with technology experience, somebody who was an entrepreneur, but also had the financial acumen. So like for me, having served on FI boards, financial institution boards, like Blue Shore Financial, which is a credit union, and the Royal Canadian Mint, that brought a level of credibility, I feel, to supplement my technology experience. So the board is AGF, and AGF, they're in Toronto, organization that's been around for 65 years, lots of great history, and a public organization. And, when I first met with the recruiter, I wanted to understand what exactly that they were looking for to make sure that I was a fit. So having met with the recruiter, feeling very comfortable around understanding the organization a little bit more, the values that they that were important to them, I felt that there was a good fit. We went ahead then for me to virtually meet with the executive chair and another board member, as well as the CEO. And we had some really great conversations, and I got to understand them. I think they got to understand me as well in terms of whether this was a personality fit and a skills fit. And then I was asked to go in person. So I flew to Toronto and I met with every single board member, some individually, one-on-ones, and then other in small groups. And just trying to, I think for them, bringing on somebody new that didn't come from a financial background, and something that was very different for them, right? Everybody else on the board had deep financial background experience. And so I think they felt comfortable with bringing me on board, that I was going to bring kind of another and a different voice around technology, digital transformation, cybersecurity, all of those types of skills. And I think my diverse background in terms of like as an entrepreneur as well, and my geographical diversity coming from BC. So that all added to it. So it's been a really great experience so far. I would say that public boards are highly organized. We have a lot of systems and processes that have been in place for many, many years. Of course, the public disclosures and so forth. We need to be very careful about, how we handle things, buying shares, selling shares, all of those really important, requirements that we need to ensure is part of that process. So I would say that it's no harder to serve on a public board, because typically when you get to that level, you have all the experts that are in place around the governance piece. But it's definitely something that you want to be very careful of around your own conversations and dealings and so forth, that there's no conflict and so forth. So I've really enjoyed it so far. Still a huge learning curve, and I'm constantly learning, but really enjoyed that experience so far.
And did they, when you were going through the process, did they ask what committee you wanted to be on, or did they just say, "Hey, based on your background, we'd like you to fill"? How did that conversation go?
There are 3 committees. So there's the audit committee, there's an HR and compensation committee, and a nominations and corporate governance committee. So I basically told them that I would be open to serving on any of those committees. Even though I don't have a financial background, on almost all my other boards, I serve on either a risk or an audit committee. So that I do bring that experience, but felt that maybe in my first year, it would be good to serve on the other 2 committees, and then potentially at audit in a future date. But I sit in on the audit committees anyways, and ensure that I'm learning and understanding like that process for a public company as an audit committee member. So even though I'm not serving there, I'm listening in and observer, and still able to ask questions.
That's great. That's kind of what I would have thought. You and I hadn't talked about it, but I thought sharing that, because that comes up when people say, in interviews, well, there might be, you can either lead with, I'm really interested in this committee, or they may ask you. And I think being prepared for where you can add value and what might be best in your first or second year. So maybe we'll move to, so congratulations once again on landing that public company board. And I know for a lot of women, that transition from going from not-for-profit, from being an executive, from being an entrepreneur, to serving on private company boards, to getting their first public company board is really a pivotal moment, a pivotal stage in their board career. So that's why I wanted to acknowledge you and also share your experiences. So if you were able to impart to our listeners today, what would be the top 3 tips you would say to women leaders thinking about embarking on their own board journey? I know we touched a little bit, but what would be the 3 top tips that you would say to someone if they're thinking, they called you up and said, I'm thinking about, starting on my board journey? What would be those 3 top tips?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say number 1 is you have to put in the foundational work. So often I actually get people who come and say, hey, I want to serve on a paid board. And so my advice is typically, it's not that it's impossible, but you typically would start with like a smaller not-for-profit, and then eventually into like government or university boards, and to get kind of learn your chops, right, around the governance table. And then you would eventually get into a higher profile board. And sometimes the higher profile boards don't necessarily pay a lot either. So you need to kind of think about, rather than jumping into a paid board, think about alignment with your values. Like, why is it that I want to serve on this board? It can't just be about the money. It needs to be that you feel a passion for the organization or what they're doing and things that they're accomplishing, or something within that challenge that you feel aligned to. So I think that's really the first piece. And then, like any career, you would need to work your way up. And, having said all that, I don't want to deter any woman, especially from saying, don't go and put your name out there, because so many women, and myself as well, may not feel ready for that next step. And I think it's important to put yourself out there, and because there are a lot of opportunities right now, and there's no harm in putting your name out. So I would say that's number 1, the foundational work. The other piece I would say is the continuous learning piece. Being a great board member means being curious all the time. And as part of that curiosity, you have to be constantly learning. So there are lots of great courses out there right now on some of the hot topics of the day. I got my ICD designation. It's the Institute for Corporate Directors. And while it was a lot of work, I felt that it was well worth the time and the energy to do that. And there are so many courses now around ESG, environmental social governance, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, climate change, cybersecurity, digital transformation. Those are some of the hot topics of this time. And it's important, I think, for directors to continue learning about those topics and what other boards are talking about, and how boards are dealing with these topics, and what to measure and the metrics and all of that. I've for sure also recommended the Women Get on Board financial intelligence program. So financial acumen is really important for any board, right? Because every board has an audit committee. Every board needs to approve financials, and for a lot of people, that's not their background. And there's sometimes some nervousness as to, do I really understand what I'm reading here in order to approve these? So I've gotten really great feedback from people who have taken that program, Deborah. So kudos to you for offering that, because I think that's a huge need. And then finally, I would say the last piece is to build your reputation as a board member that others want to work with. So, besides showing up and being prepared and taking on those leadership opportunities, just being those people on the board that drive the strategic conversation, to always pull back from sometimes directors tend to get into the weeds and dive in a little bit too much, and being that individual who can kind of pull everybody back out, and while driving consensus, sometimes also having that courage to play devil's advocate and challenge that status quo. And it's not always the right time to do that. You need to really get that comfort of knowing when to speak up, when to pull back a little, and pulling the group out of the groupthink. So to me, respectful debate is kind of that environment that you want to have a little bit of tension and then drive to consensus at the end. So once you do that enough, I think your reputation as a board member starts to elevate, and then other board members that you work with end up saying, hey, this person that I work with, they're really effective at the board table, and then people will start recommending you.
So 3 great top tips. One thing, as part of continuous learning, what I would say is not only the learning that you can as an individual board member, but what you can collectively learn as a board. So we know that, with Hallibank Jurgensen's Confident Boards program, which I've done, and the climate change, continuous learning, she has a book called Stewards of the Future, and it's about that being, modern governance more, shall we say. And if there's areas within, the board needs to learn, and maybe there's a piece on cybersecurity, you bring experts in, maybe there's a piece around DEI, but as a board, collectively, there's individual learning, but there's collective learning. And so that would be my one additional piece, especially if you're chair of or if you're on the nominating corporate governance committee, that's one of your mandates, is for making sure the board has continuous education. So just a little from my perspective, but
that's such a good point, Deborah, because on most of my boards now, as part of the governance committee, we're looking at that joint learning within the entire board, because individual learning is important, but having that opportunity that even if an individual goes and takes a course, to be able to bring that back to the group to say, this is what I've learned. And then others might want to take that course, or then there's an opportunity to then further that conversation within the board table and bring those experts in, that you can learn and discuss how it's relevant to your own board together. That's really important. So that's a really great point, Deborah.
Well, thank you. I'm just mindful of time. So maybe what I'll just say to you, Cybele, so much learning. You are on an amazing journey. I'm not sure what's next for you. Have you got your next? I didn't ask that question in advance, but I'm asking you, what's your next?
Well, I think at this moment, I'm on quite a few boards, so I'm not looking for another opportunity out there. But over time, as I step off of some of my current boards, probably another public board would be hopefully in my future. So that's what I would be looking for.
Thank you. And then if anyone wanted to follow up with you or find out more about you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a board profile website that I've set up. It's cybelenegris.ca. So it features some of the boards that I'm on, as well as contact information that folks can reach out to me. I'm also on LinkedIn, so quite busy there. So feel free, anyone, to reach out to me on LinkedIn, either directly to me or through my company, Webnames.ca.
And thank you, Cybele. That's it for the edition of Women Get on Board in Conversation. Cybele, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insights. And I want to say thank you for being an amazing ambassador for Women Get on Board over the years. I am just very grateful. And to find more resources for your board journey or join our Women Get On Board community, we are now more than 850 members strong. Visit womengetonboard.ca.